Hey again, this is Max from Center Music House. Thanks for tuning in to lesson 2/6 of the online guitar class for beginners that we're offering in partnership with the Framingham Public Library. Today's lesson with Rehards covers a lot, so be sure to take your time and watch this as many times as you need to get comfortable with the material. And if you have any questions, be sure to email them to Helen at the library and tune into our live Q&A that we're going to be doing this Saturday at 6:30 p.m. on the Center Music House YouTube channel. Lastly, this week you can get 15% off guitar stands and guitar hangers from Center Music House when you use the promo code READ2 at checkout. So this is a guitar stand. It has a kind of a cradle for the body and the neck. And it's great because if you want to keep the guitar out of the case, you can put it on the guitar stand. That way it's not leaning on a sofa or a table or anything where it could possibly knock over and fall down and break the guitar. Also guitar hangers, those are things that you can mount on the wall, and you just put the guitar on the wall hanger and it's hanging just like a piece of art. It looks really great, and it gets the guitar off the floor. So again, when the guitar is on the floor, it's in danger. So just go to centermusic.com/read. The promo code is READ2. Guys, enjoy this video and we'll see you at the live Q&A. Have fun.
Hi everyone, my name is Rehards and I'm a teacher at Center Music House. This is lesson number 2 in the series of 6 on how to play guitar. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how to learn the full C, G, and a new chord, D chord, and we're also going to talk about some basic rhythm, some basic strumming, and learn our first song, Leaving on a Jet Plane. So let's get started. So let's start by reviewing our simple G and C chords, right? So if we remember our G chord that we learned last week, you take your third finger, so 1, 2, 3, third finger, your ring finger, and it's going to go on the 3rd fret of the 1st string right here. So let's remember the few key guidelines. So we want to go from top down, so top down onto the neck. So we want to play on our tips and have this nice little curl, right? Also remember about the positioning. You want to put your finger as close to, but before the metal bar, a little bit before the metal bar, right? So as we learn more chords, you'll realize that not always you'll be able to keep this perfect shape, but that's why it's a guideline. You want to come as close to it as you can. Not necessarily that you have to do it correctly. You just want to kind of try to do it in that way. So our third finger on the 3rd fret, 1st string, and remember 1, 2, 3, 4 from 4th string. Nice. Now if we do it with the C chord, we take our 1st finger, 2nd string, 1st fret over here, and we're going to be playing 1, 2, 3, 3 strings, right? So with the C chord, you have to be extra careful to remember that curve and also fingertip, everything that we talked about, even more so because now your 1st finger, your 1st string is in danger of being muted by the 1st finger. So what can happen is your 1st finger, if you're not going from top down, playing on your fingertips, you might be muting the 1st string, which you don't want because you want the 1st string to be an open one, right? So just be mindful of that. Just be mindful and careful with that. Great. So now that we've reviewed the G and the C chord, let's learn the full versions, right? So let's start with the G chord. Let's start the way we already know. So 3rd finger, 3rd fret, 1st string. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add our 1st finger right here to the 2nd fret of the 5th string, just like in your diagram, right? And then now this is a little bit of a stretch, your middle finger is going to go on the 3rd fret of the 6th string, just like this, just like right here. And if you notice in the diagram, we have no X's above the strings, which means that we're playing all the strings, both the finger ones and the open ones. So, right? Nice. So I know this is quite a bit of a stretch, and it might be difficult for some of you to do that right now. And that's completely fine. You know, what we're working with here is, first of all, stretching your hand, making your fingers more flexible and stretched out. And secondly, just the tiny muscles in the fingers, we're strengthening them, right? So it's going to take time for them to become flexible and strong enough to really, without much effort, do this chord. So that's okay, just do the best you can and just try to get it there. And if you're hearing a little bit of a buzz or anything, that's fine. Just keep working on it, keep revisiting the guidelines, the fingertip and all that thing. And in a couple of weeks, it should be fine. You should be starting to get it if you're having problems. So that's completely okay. So let's take a look at the C chord. Now, let's start the same way we started with the simple one. Our first finger is going to go on the first fret, second string, right? Now, our second finger, our middle finger, is going to go on the fourth string, the D string, on the second fret. And then our third finger, our ring finger, is going to go on the third fret, fifth string. Now, if you look at the diagram, even though it's a full C chord, we still have a string which we don't want to play, which is the open E string, the bottom, the sixth string. So you have an X above it in the diagram. So when you strum it, again, be mindful. Do it just from the fifth string, right? Great, so we have the full G chord and the full C chord. Congratulations. Let's add a new one, the D chord. So the D chord is going to be only on four strings. So we're not going to be playing the open sixth and open fifth string. However, you'll notice that the D chord, the lowest note that we're going to be playing on the D chord, is the open D string, right? Cool. So what you want to do is place your first finger on the second fret of the third string. So first finger, your index finger, is going to go on the second fret of the third of the G string. Now your ring finger, your third finger, is going to go on the third fret of the B string of the second string. So third fret, second string, and your middle finger is going to go right in there in between on the first string, second fret, like this. So you get this kind of a triangle kind of shape, right? And again, 1, 2, 3, 4 from the fourth string. Let's strum down. Nice. So it might take a little bit of tinkering around to figure how to play it nice and clean, but again, that's completely fine. You're just starting off with these, so it's going to take a little bit of time to get used to them. So we have our G, we have our D, and we have our D chord. Nice. In order to know how to use and play these chords in a musical context, like, for example, a song, right? What you want to do is to know how to use rhythm and how to read rhythm. So in music, we sort of have this timeline, this rhythmic timeline on which we place notes to know when and where and how they're supposed to be played, right? So in terms of rhythm, we use certain things to organize this rhythmic timeline. One of them is we recognize the pulse of the timeline. We recognize the pulse of the music, the beat. So usually you already do this whenever you listen to a song that you really like or even dance to, you're going to be tapping your foot, right? So you're tapping to the beat, you're tapping to the pulse. And the pulse gives you information about, well, first of all, how do these different rhythmic values, rhythmic things in the music relate to each other? And secondly, it gives you a certain tempo in which the song is in, right? So that's one thing. And so to organize it further, we use things like time signatures and measures. So measures or bars, you can hear musicians call them either way, a measure or a bar. So measures are small little segments of this musical timeline, basically this musical timeline of a piece divided in smaller segments. So what these smaller pieces of music allow us to do is to easier identify and see how to perform them and how to read them, and also not get lost when you're reading musical notation or when you're counting to it or just following along, right? So these are measures, and time signatures represent how long the measures are. Now, we're going to return to time signatures in just a minute. First, let's talk about the different rhythmic subdivisions. So first off, we have a whole note. It's one big note and it's worth 4 beats. So if I would clap a whole note and I would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or if I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, da, for 4 whole beats, that's a whole note. Now the way rhythm and music works mostly, and like in a basic way, it gets subdivided further on from the whole note. So if you divide the whole note in 2, you're going to get 2 half notes. Now, 1 half note is half of the value of the whole note. So if the whole note is 4 beats long, a half note is going to be 2 beats long. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Da, da, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So 2 beats each note. If you divide a half note, you're going to get quarter notes. Each quarter note is worth 1 beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Da, 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 da. Next up, after quarter notes, we have 8 notes. So a quarter note divides into 8 notes. This is where it gets a little reversed, because instead of having certain rhythmic values over a span of multiple beats or a beat, we have multiple rhythmic values within 1 beat, meaning that an 8th note means 2 notes per 1 beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Further on, we have 16th notes and so on and so on. It keeps dividing down. So what we're going to be mainly concerned about is 8 notes and quarter notes. We're going to be using those to learn how to strum in just a minute. Now, going back to our time signature, if you see, time signature is represented by numbers 4, 4. Well, 4, 4 is the most common time signature. In the Western world, there's a lot of other time signatures too, but the most common one is 4, 4. So that's what you're seeing in this example, it's 4, 4. So what those numbers mean is that we have the top number 4 of a certain value within the bar. So 4 of something in the bar, that's how long the bar is. And the bottom number is the value, which in this case is 4, meaning quarter note. So 4, 4 means 4 quarter notes per measure or per bar. So one measure will be 4 quarter notes or 4 beats long. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Next measure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's why when you go to a concert, you hear musicians counting off. They count 1, 2, 3, 4, or sometimes 3, 4, you know. So those are the basics of rhythm. So now let's take a look at strumming. So for strumming, you already know quite a bit actually from what we talked last time about how to position your right hand and how to glide over the strings and let your hand fall. At least in terms of that, we covered the downstroke. Now we also have the upstroke, and in different chord sheets and things like that, you'll find that strumming is usually notated by quarter notes or 8 notes, sometimes 16th notes, and with arrows up or down, right? Symbolizing if it's a downstroke, arrow going down, or an upstroke, arrow going up, arrow going up. So let's just take a look at the downstroke again, just a little bit, right? So you position your hand and you just let your hand fall, glide over the strings, just like we talked about it. Right? If you can do the chords and you feel comfortable with the chords, do this with the chords. Now remember, in terms of chords, when we strum, we want to strum from the right string. So D chord from the 4th, C chord from the 5th, G from the 6th. So just pick one chord, or if you don't want to play a chord, just open strings and just give it like 4 downstrokes. Right? So remember we talked about 4, 4. So you just played 1 bar of the G chord basically. 2, 3, 4. Good. So let's talk about the upstroke a little bit. So the upstroke's a little tricky. It's the same as the downstroke, only in reverse. One key guideline I guess here would be that you want to hit as much of the notes, as much of the strings as you can going up, because what happens often is people do a full nice chord when they're going on a downstroke, but then when they're doing an upstroke, they barely touch the first 2 or 3 strings, right? So if when you do an upstroke, you want to find an angle from where you're coming to do that upstroke, so you cover all the strings, right? Or as much as you can. What might help is to imagine that there's like this kind of half circle, like this pendulum kind of motion going back and forth over here. Now, because that might give you an idea of from what angles to aim at or to play around with to get the full sound. Now, however, of course, I'm very over-exaggerating this motion. You don't want to really play guitar like that. But that might help to just, you know, help you figure out how you want to approach strumming from down or up. Be it with pick or fingers, doesn't really matter. So when you have your downstrokes, and you can do upstrokes, 2, 3, 4, let's do like 4 upstrokes or so, then we can combine them and alternate them. So we have down and upstrokes. So down, up, down, up. Now, so far, we've been doing these in quarter notes. So 1 bar, basically. So 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're feeling up for it, you can try out playing the 8th note up and down. Down and up pattern. So in 8 notes, remember what that means. That means that now we have 2 notes, or in this case, 2 strokes, 2 strums per 1 beat. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Now notice this. In quarter notes, 1, 2, 3, 4. In 8 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So 1, down, up, 2, down, up. 1, 2, 3, 4. A thing I should mention about the upstrokes in different chords, the same thing going down, you want to find the right string from which to start the chord. The same thing with going up, you want to kind of pick it off so you don't hit the strings that you don't want, like I just did for that D chord, right? You don't really want to go way past that 4th string, even when you're going up. That's a little tricky, but again, just play around, experiment with it, and see how it goes. Now, if you have ever searched online for chords for a specific song, you probably will stumble upon a lot of different versions, a lot of different ways to notate chords, to show how the progression is going and stuff like that. Sometimes you will find just the lyrics, for example, with the chord symbols above it with no rhythmic notation, right? So you will have to know the song by heart, basically, to know the rhythm, how to put together the rhythm of the chords with the lyrics that are written there. So what we're going to be doing here, we're going to take a look at one of the more traditional ways how to notate chord progressions, because in my opinion, that's one of the most cleanest and clearest ways to teach how to play chord progressions and things like that. So we'll start off by recapping on what's a measure or a bar. We also call it a bar. So on the written music, you'll see that there's these vertical lines separating the 5 horizontal lines. So remember we talked about the musical timeline and how measures divide this timeline into smaller segments, right? Smaller comprehensible musical pieces. So these small vertical lines are exactly that. We call them bar lines, and then they divide the measures. They show us where the previous measure ends and where the next measure starts. At the beginning, of course, we have 4/4, the time signature, so meaning 4 quarter notes or 4 beats per measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, next measure, 1, 2, 3, 4. Above the measures, we have chord symbols, G, C. In the very last bar, you'll see that there's no chord symbol above the measure. So what that means is that the D is repeated again. So if there's no chord symbol above a measure, usually that means that we just keep repeating the chord from the previous measure. You'll also notice that we have no notes written on the staff here. We only have the chord symbols. And we fill in the staff with the slashes, with the diagonal slashes. So the slashes means that there's no noted in music. So we're just gonna play the chords. We're just gonna play the chord symbols in whatever way we're supposed to play them for the song. You'll also realize if you look up online that some of these charts have strumming patterns or picking patterns written in. In this one, we don't have it because I don't want you to worry too much about it right now. Right now, we're just going to go through the song doing the simple strumming patterns that we covered previously, the 4 downstrokes or upstrokes or alternating down, up, down, up. The same with 8 notes as well, down, up, down, up, down, up. So now that we know how to read all of this stuff and how to understand it, let's take a look at our first song. As our first song, we're going to be taking a look at John Denver's Leaving on a Jet Plane. So let's dig right in. So the song only has 3 chords, the G, C, and the D chords, which we learned the full versions today. And for now, don't worry about the strumming too much. We're going to be using the patterns that we covered a little bit earlier. So first off, let's just put the chords in the correct order. So if you look at the notated example, we have each bar, almost each bar, has its own chord, right? So we have the G chord, next bar C chord, next bar G, then C, then G, then C again, and then D. Now the D is going to last for 2 bars. So it sounds a little bit like this. Right? And so on. So that's the correct order. So one thing about changing from chord to chord, so there's a couple of things I want you to be very mindful of, in addition to how you're placing your fingers, right? So instead of what I see a lot of beginners do is they play a chord like this G chord, for example, and then what they do to transfer to that C chord, they take their whole hand away from the fretboard and then try to find the C chord again. So that's a very long and lengthy process. Think about it. You play the G chord, you take your hand away, and now you have to not just locate where the notes are, but bring all those fingers back in. Now, it might not seem like a lot of time, but when you're playing chords and you want to be in time, especially if you're playing with other people, now that small amount of time matters a lot. So what you want to do instead is find the most efficient way to move to the next chord by moving your fingers as little as possible. So if you're going from this G chord right here to the C chord, I might do something a little bit like this if I'm going slow motion. See? My fingers don't move away and then go back up. They literally already from the G chord notes start moving to the C chord notes. To that finger, right? One thing that might help you with this is to visualize the next chord, like where your fingers should be going for the next chord. Visualize before going there. And in your mind, map out the fastest possible route for your fingers to get to the next chord. That way well, first of all, you're practicing memorizing the chords better. And secondly, you're really working it out in your mind, and then you're just telling your fingers what to do. Like, just go easy. Like, these 2 fingers, well, they're already kind of in the right shape. They just need to move down, come down here, over here to the C chord, and then we just add this one. We go from the bottom note here, up here, right? So the same with going to D chord, right? Or for that matter, shifting from any chord to another chord. You want to really work on making those changes as effortless and as efficient as possible. So when you have that sorted down, and by down I mean at least kind of figured out, because it's going to take a lot of practice to get it really down. When you have it sorted down, let's add the strumming. Let's just go through the song using downstrokes in quarter notes. So since we have 4/4, so 4 beats per measure, 4 quarter notes per measure. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Next measure is the C chord. Remember to check from which string you're supposed to be playing. Next measure back to G chord, then C, then G, then C, and then D. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We repeat the beat D 2 times because it's 2 bars of D. Then you can do the same with upstrokes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, so on, right? And then start alternating the quarter notes. So down, up, 1, 2, 3, 4, G chord, 1, 2, 3, C chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you go to the D chord, eventually after another G and C, 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember what we talked about, not to hit the strings that you don't want to hit, not to hit them with your right hand. Be mindful of that, even when you're doing upstrokes. Cool. And if you feel super comfortable with that already, then what you can practice is the eighth note alternating pattern. So down, up, down, up. So eighth note, remember, means that we have 2 notes or 2 strums per 1 beat. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to be going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So twice as much down and up per bar, right? And you can go through the whole song that way. And so on, the D chord. Great. So today we covered the full versions of the G, C, and we added a new chord, the D chord. We also talked about rhythm and how to subdivide rhythm, whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes. What does a time signature mean for 4? What does a measure mean? We also talked about a few very basic strumming patterns. So 4 quarter notes down, 4 quarter notes up, alternating down, up, and 8 notes. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, right? And we also learned our first song. We learned how to read the chord chart and how to play our first song leaving on a jet plane. So that's quite a lot, and that's quite a lot to practice as well. So remember to just keep it slow, keep it nice and easy, take your time with it, and just experiment, see what works best for you, and just have fun. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to send them in to the email address below. We're going to be addressing those in a live Q&A this Saturday at 6:30 p.m. again. There's also going to be the chat function so you can ask questions in real time, in real life. And hopefully I'll see you there. Otherwise, my name is Richards. I'm a teacher at Centrum Music House. It's been a pleasure teaching you today, and I'll see you next week.